What's going on, you guys? Today we're going to be going over all the wood phase spells to see which one is the best and which ones you should completely avoid as much as I avoid my taxes. So if you all enjoy content like this, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any upcoming videos as we go over all the different elemental spells over the next few days. The tier system will be your normal tier scale, from S tier being the highest and then D tier being the lowest, with A, B, C in between. But with that all out of the way, let's proceed to the rest of the video. So then, going into the very first wood phase spell you get in the game is going to be Lightning Bolt, which calls down a bolt of lightning on a lock-on target or on a point of a certain distance in front of you, meaning it has a limited range on how far it can actually go. The limited range really does mess with things up a lot, as some enemies you are just barely out of range of. Like if they're on like a ledge or something and you want to snipe an enemy, the bolt will just stop right in front of them and it's very annoying. The spell itself is actually quite powerful, but only costs 236 spirit to cast, so quick strike for like 200-ish damage from a safe range, it still really isn't that bad. And it's better for taking out smaller enemies than bosses, I've noticed. In PvP, Lightning Bolt still kind of hits pretty hard, but it's nothing too crazy. It occasionally messes up players from being able to deflect it, since it does have like a delayed output when the lightning strike itself actually comes up. So it has a couple mix-up features to it, I guess that you can say, and it's a pretty good spell to be able to use after a critical blow as a wake-up, just for some quick damage. Overall, not necessarily the strongest spell, it's not a bad one either, so you can't complain too much. Quick cast, low spirit, decent damage, this easily lands it in the B category. Now, the spell we're going over now is going to be Cleanse. It resets all current negative effects, so it sets them all to 0, and all your nearby allies will grant a positive effect that reduces the amount of negative effect accumulation for all phases except metal, meaning it removes all of your negative effects and gives a buff that makes it harder for you to then accumulate more negative effects for a short period of time, except obviously for metal spells, so anything poison related. For the most part, this spell is too situational. Most of the time, at least from my playthrough, there was only maybe 4 times where Cleanse would have actually been useful, but for the majority of the game it was completely unnecessary, and because of how situational it is, I'm putting it in the D category. The next spell is going to be Absorb Vitality, which makes it so you can hit enemies and you will regain health back. Your allies also get this buff, so it's really good utility. The health gained is based off of how much damage you do, so the higher the damage number, the higher the healing. So just hitting an enemy alone doesn't heal for too much, but it's a long-lasting buff that goes a long way for free healing basically. The point at which it shines though is when you can critical strike an enemy. Since it does so much damage, you can heal up half of your health bar in a single critical strike. Same kind of applies to PvP. I personally have never ran out of all 5 of my healing pots before, but if you're more of an aggressive player trading blows, it's definitely nice to get some free health. You actually hit harder on the AIs than you do on the players, so being able to use their AIs specifically as heals with this spell is actually really good. This one's hard for me personally, it's kind of meh, but I can see it being very viable for most casual players running in PvE, so honestly I will put it in the A category. Our next spell is called Barbed Conductor, which this spell actually surprised me in the testing. It grows branches on the ground at your feet, and then you can activate it again while the branch remains, and it will call down a bolt of lightning on them. And at first, I thought this spell was going to be hot ass, but it's actually pretty strong. It looks like there's actually 2 hits to the move. The explosion from the branches themselves, and then the lightning that comes down directly on the branches. If you can time it right, as an enemy is running at you, and the second they walk over the branch, you can hit them with the bolt strike and do over 300 damage instantly. Funny enough though, in PvP, it's useless except for one specific thing that I found out instantly makes it overpowered. After you down your opponent's AI or teammate, you can place a branch right on top of their dead body and bait them into it, since their first instinct is always to revive their downed allies. So you can set a trap that does massive amounts of damage. You may not always hit them with the bolt hits, but you will still hit them with the explosion from the branch to stop them from reviving, so it's actually very powerful. And so for those reasons, Barbed Conductor is actually going into two different categories. B for PvE, because it's still a whole setup for others to move into, and kind of like, it's like a whole thing. It's okay in PvE, but I am going to put it in an A category for PvP, just for being able to easily stop hosts from reviving. Extremely underrated spell, was not expecting this. For the next spell is Unstoppable Force. Honestly, this one will be quick. For a 500 spirit cost to make your spirit recover faster, in my opinion, doesn't really do much, because if you're good at deflecting, you'll always be in positive spirit, and I tested it. It does fully recharge about 3 seconds faster than without having the spell activated, so it's not bad at all. Just not really worth the extra spell slot if you're good at deflecting. D tier, because meh, kinda mid. Then Inner Breath is going to be our next spell, and this one is low-key a sleeper spell, at least in my opinion. So what it does is that it increases the accumulation of the Divine Beast gauge for a certain period of time, which, if you pair this with my favorite Divine Beast, Yinglong, the dragon one, you don't use its skill at all, you use its passive, which makes it so anytime you die, it instantly revives you. So, as you can see, already after just killing these first 3 mobs, I already got my Divine Spirit back. And then after dying and then killing the other 3, I got it back again. So essentially, with this spell paired with this Divine Beast, you are unbeatable. S tier spell with Yingling. Without it, honestly, still going to be a B tier. Then it's kind of meh. Next up is the Lightning Weapon, which, just instantly getting into it, any imbued weapon spell is going to be an S tier, instantly. Extra damage is amazing as long as you pair it against the enemy's right weakness. Do I really have to say more? Like, come on, let's be honest, goated. Anyways, the next spell is going to be Lightning Rush, one of my personal favorites, but I won't be too biased just because I like it. Lightning Rush hurls a lightning bolt that rushes forward. Decent damage, kind of a high spell cost spirit cost at 373, but it makes up for that in the fact that it passes through enemies. So lining up enemies, you are able to hit multiple of them, so essentially gains more damage the more enemies hit. A great spell for hurting enemies. A beautiful spell for PvP as well. Long range, easy to pass through a host and hit their AIs, great damage, and a good spell to use as a wake-up attack after a critical blow. Definitely an A tier spell in my opinion. Okay, so for the next spells, I'm actually going to be grouping them together because they're kind of the same. You'll see what I mean. So, the spells are Guard Formation, which creates an area that reduces the damage allies inside of it take from enemies, and then Focus Zone, which generates an area in which allies inside of it deal additional damage to enemies. One makes you tanky, the other one makes you hit harder. Cool, but also not cool, because the zones are stuck in place of where you cast it. The zones themselves aren't big in the slightest either, so normal enemies just instantly get knocked out of the zone from regular hits. Most bosses move too much to ever even be in the zones for you to even hit them, and as you can tell here, I even hit this enemy outside the zone, so my critical blow wasn't able to do full damage. Because of them being too situational, I'm putting them in the C category. Would be an A category if enemies would never ever leave the zone. But next, another quick one being Spirit Favor. Fervor? Yeah, Fervor, sorry. It grants you and your allies a positive effect that increases spirit gain when attacking. Once again, if you're good at deflecting, you'll get your spirit back no problem, so in my opinion, it's not worth the spell slot. D category for this spell. Now for another personal favorite of mine, Barbed Nightmare. Barbed Nightmare summons thorns from the ground to attack enemies, dealing damage to enemies, and restores HP for you and nearby allies for a portion of the damage dealt. This spell does a ton of damage, a wide AoE, and it heals you and your allies based on how much damage you do. That's pretty amazing to me. I cannot tell you, there were like so many times me and my friends, we were going through this game low on HP in a crowd full of enemies, and I cast this spell and we get fully healed on top of clearing the horde of enemies is insane. Amazing spell. For PvEP, as another wake up move, it's very strong, lots of damage, and it heals. Can't go wrong with this spell. The only downside to it is that it has a high spirit cost. You only get off about 2 casts of this before you're out of spirit completely, but with good deflex, you can spam reliably and be able to use this for high DPS and be a healer for your teammates. This is definitely an S tier spell, perfect for every wood build. The next spell is Heaven's Rage. It calls down many bolts of lightning to strike in front of you. It has some decent range to it, but if an enemy is directly in front of you and walking towards you, they'll most likely walk directly past the spell entirely. It's definitely more of something to use from afar or on an enemy that is very large so that it will get hit by everything. In PvP, it's definitely not the greatest move ever, but it has its chances to be good. Catching an enemy off guard, getting hit by every strike of lightning will most likely kill them. Overall, I'd put this spell into the A category if you're fighting a large boss. If not, then it's definitely more of like a B category. And now finally onto the very last spell, which is Perfect Restoral, which grants you and nearby allies a positive effect that completely negates an enemy's attack once. Which sounds good, but I'll be honest, it kinda sucks. If you have this as a backup just in case you kinda get hit by one, like through one of your deflects, then I can see it being kind of useful, but for the most part, again, if you're good at deflecting, you probably aren't going to die. That's something you get wombo comboed from and you'll be fine as long as you know how to deflect. I know I say that a lot, but I mean, let's be real, the deflecting in this game is like pretty much this entire game's existence. But that's going to end it there for the tier list and finally be done with all the wood phase spells. Tomorrow we will be going over all the fire spells and I'll give you my thoughts on all of them for which ones are the best and my favorites. But let me know what you all think of this tier list in the comments down below. Tell me if I messed up on anything, on any of the spells you might think is better or worse than where I put them. And that's going to be it for me, you guys. Thanks for watching, enjoy the rest of your day and your gameplay. Peace.